Hello, everyone. On behalf of IBM Systems Magazine, I'd like to welcome you to our presentation. My name is Janine Donnelly. I'm the manager of webinars for IBM Systems Magazine, and I will be the moderator for today's event. We will be holding a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, but you may ask a question at any time during the event by entering it into the Q&A panel. If you experience technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the Q&A panel to alert us, and someone will assist you. You may download a PDF version of the slide deck by clicking on the drop-down menu labeled Event Resources. You'll find that on the left side of your screen. And you can download those right from the platform without being disconnected from the webinar. Today's webinar, Virtualization Considerations for Hardware Changes, is brought to you by Help Systems. I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker for today, IBM Champion and Executive Vice President of Technical Solutions at Help Systems, Tom Huntington. Tom, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Janine, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Virtualization webinar. This is part of the POWER9 series that the IBM magazine has been putting on this fall, late winter, early winter, I guess we should call it, in Minnesota. Anyways, very excited to be here with you. I am Tom Huntington. I've been working with Help Systems for 30 years now, and back in the day we didn't have virtualization. We've had it since 1999 on this platform, and here today we're even here to show you that it's gotten a lot easier with Ibm Power Vc and some of the tools from Help Systems. I'm joined here by my colleague Chuck Lazinski, Director of Technical Solutions at Help Systems. Chuck, good morning.
Hi, hello everyone. Chuck Lazinski. I've been at Help Systems for about 20 years now, focusing on IBM I, automation, monitoring, security, document management, business intelligence, and so forth, all the solutions we have available for IBM I.
Thank you, Chuck. And then we have Tom Komendowski, one of our systems technicians at Help Systems, and he works behind the scenes for us. Tom, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Greetings. I'm doing good. Been with Help Systems for 13 years now, running the I-Series platform for them, doing networking, everything like that under the sun. Good to be here.
Thank you, Tom. We'll be interviewing Tom today about his usage of Power Vc. So excited to be with you today to talk about virtualization on POWER9. We'll be talking about the IBM Power Vc technology, holistic monitoring by Chuck, and then back to me on high availability and some considerations for that, and then we'll wrap it up with a Q&A. As we go along today, we'll also have some polling questions we would like you to take part in. So our first topic is virtualization on POWER9, and how do we know that this platform's even virtualized? And one of the sources that we use is the Ibm I Marketplace Survey that we have launched now for the last 5 years. Matter of fact, a little plug on this. We'll have results in early January. Look for a webinar sponsored by Help Systems and by IBM in the January 17th time frame. But anyways, the Marketplace Survey that we took last year pointed towards the usage of partitions or VMs. I think as we look at the landscape of IT, as we move forward in Power world, we need to consider or start thinking about them as VMs, as the rest of the world won't know what you talk about if you say partitions. But partition technology has been around since 1999 on the Power platform, and today, when we look at our survey, the number of customers that are using the VM technology is over 70%, and pretty amazing thought process here to think about how we've been using this technology as we've consolidated over the last almost 20 years now of technology on the Power platform. Now, the other thing to think about is what other servers are alongside your IBM I operating system. I know some of you out there might be AIX-based or Linux-based, and we're seeing a uptick in the number of AIX, IBM I, Linux mixed environments. So it's fun to see that growth in this area. So let's go to our first polling question and ask you, how many partitions or VMs do you manage today? And Janine's going to launch that for us. You have just one, meaning you have just an instance, you run 2 to 5 VMs, 6 to 20, 21 to 50, more than 50. Speaking of Power 9, if you are looking at upgrading from Power 7, Power 6, maybe even Power 5 to Power 9, at Help Systems we do have the Performance Navigator product, and that can help you size your next system. It's very good at taking a look at Linux, AIX, NMON information, and then of course IBM I collection services to be able to predict your next purchase in the Power 9 technology. All right, are we about there, Janine, with our results?
You know, I'm going to give it one more tick here. I think we'll get an update in about 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
There we go. I'll send these results out, Tom.
Thank you very much, Janine. Appreciate that. How many partitions do you manage today? Or I got to get used to saying VMs. How many VMs do you manage? Looks like 10% with one, about almost 20% with 2 to 5, 6 to 20, pretty heavily used there, 36% nearly, and 21%, 22% with 21 or more, and then more than 50. So we have several of you out there that are using more than 50 partitions. Fantastic. Thank you for answering that question. Let's go back to the slides and move on in. And, you know, another part of not just having VMs or partitions is thinking about your storage. And one of the other things we've been tracking through the IBM I Marketplace is the consumption of storage area networks on the IBM I platform. We've seen this number go over the years from, you know, as little as 25% to now just about 30% of the market is using external storage. And we think we'll just see this number continue to grow and grow as we progress. All right, let's move on to our next topic, which is the IBM Power Vc technology for managing your partitions, your VMs. So IBM Power Vc is technology that's been around for a while that helps you manage your infrastructure as if it's a cloud type technology. It's based on OpenStack and provides a simplified way of building images and deploying new images of IBM I, AIX, and Linux for your VMs. Very much so a very handy tool that we here use at Help Systems. And now let's look at some requirements for this technology running with your Power server. Again, keep in mind this works for AIX, IBM I, and Linux. You could have a makeup of all three or just one of those operating systems, and you can use this technology. So as we look at this, a VM really is a virtual machine or a partition on this platform. It works with Power 8, Power 9, and technically you can work with Power 7, but we'll stay current with where we're at hardware-wise. You still need an HMC involved, and you don't necessarily have to, but it works much better if you have SAN storage in this environment. There are ways to get around that with internal disks too, but for the most part, virtual SAN storage is the best way to go. Now, what are the benefits? Well, of course, the benefits, as we've talked about, is I can manage all my VMs from one spot, and I can deploy IBM I, AIX, and Linux on the fly. I can balance my resources across this environment and use what we call templates so that you can have predefined set of templates that you're going to deploy for managing your resources across the VMs. We can also expire VMs, so maybe you want, after a certain point in time when you're done testing, you want that to be notified that this VM is no longer being used. Now, another neat thing that we use here is self-deployment, the ability for our administrators to create their own Linux, IBM I, and AIX VMs. Of course, as we stated earlier, it works with Power 8 and Power 9. So let's talk about what we're doing here a little bit. And this is an image from our Power server environment. And so I have Tom Komodowski with us here today. And so, Tom, why is this useful for an administrator?
This screen basically is the initial screen you get when you start up Power VC. It's useful because it shows you your resources all in one shot. You can see how much processor you've got assigned out. It tells you, if you can see here, there's some 7 critical virtual machines. Basically, they're expired machines right now. It gives you, like in a very quick glance, an overview of your entire system, entire environment.
Excellent, excellent. Now, it looks to me like you're managing 320 VMs. Is that true?
Well, there's 320 volumes on the SAN assigned in this project.
Okay.
What we do, we have different projects split up. This one has 133 in this project.
Okay.
All told, right now we've got 349 spread across 6 projects.
Oh, all right. So that's I'm
Yep.
misreading that there. Okay, good.
Yep.
Thank you for clarifying that. Now, what about resource usage? How do you use the resource usage page or screen?
Like I say, this is a little more in depth. That gives you an idea of how your machines are assigned, how many virtual processors you're using. Basically, just another overview, another view of what you have assigned out and what you have available.
Excellent. So on the next slide, we have hosts. Are hosts the same things as individual physical boxes? What's a host when you talk IBM Power Vc?
Yeah, hosts are frames, physical boxes. Basically, they are the main system. Like I say, IBM calls them frames. It could be a standalone system. It could be a blade in a like in a frame. The
Okay.
different parts of that. Yep.
So generally, it's tied to a serial number too. Probably there's a unique serial
Yes.
number for each one of these hosts. Okay.
Yes, each
Cool.
of
So you
these
can
has its own unique serial number.
So you can manage it from a box standpoint, see all of its memory and everything right in here. Excellent.
Yes, this gives you your breakdown of where the processors. The other screens that we saw were a total for the Power VC environment. This one breaks it down by host, what processors you have on which host, how much memory they have. It gives you your connection to the HMC. So if you have multiple HMCs, you can see which ones are controlled by which HMC or NovaLink. Power VC also works at NovaLink.
Okay, so it kind of brings us on to our next slide. It sounds like you do still need
Yep.
to have an HMC, and why is that? What's the HMC doing for you that Power VC is not doing?
Yeah, the HMC is the one that actually controls the virtualization on the frame. It controls the partitions within that. Power VC is more of an overview or a system control center that tells the HMCs what to set up, what to deploy, how to work with it. So the HMC or NovaLink is more at the the physical level where you define your partitions, you define what resources are assigned to what partitions. The Power VC just tells the HMC how to do that.
Okay. Now, template images. Who built the templates? This looks like it's very beneficial. How do we use that here?
Yeah, I build the templates. No, you have
build them.
a central. Yeah. You have an administrator level. It could be multiple people. They go through and basically they would be the ones that normally do your OS installs. So you start with a blank template, and then you install the OS. You configure it how you want. You load up your QMs, your PTFs. You get it exactly how you want. Then you snapshot it and create the template that the users can use for self-deployments.
Okay, so can an image also be, like, could we have our robot software preloaded in an image or some PowerTech or some software like that along with that image as we deploy?
Yeah, if you notice here on AIX 7.1 Tango, what that is an AIX 7.1 image that has our Tango products preloaded, and then when they're using it for testing or that, they deploy that template and they already have all their products loaded, ready to go.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, okay. So that, I was wondering, so we can combine some of our software with the operating system, or the customers can do that to build out test environments. That's basically what we're doing.
Correct. And it's like I say, you configure it exactly how you want it. So when they deploy that template, the way you built it is going to be the way it starts up for them.
Yeah. So question I have about Power VC licensing, is it another application? Does it come with the Power Server? How did you get Power VC?
It is a separate product that you would order from IBM. It's created with when you place your order for your system or for additional software. I think there are different versions. I think they're combining them now, but yeah, it is a separately orderable product.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so moving from templates, we got deployment of images. What's the difference between images and templates? I'm a little confused on that.
Yeah, images are the base capture of the system that you want or the partition that you want. A deploy template, basically I would take that image and define parameters for it, like where it's going to be deployed, how much resources will be assigned, how I want it deployed. And that way the user can only see deploy templates. And when they deploy, they have just a couple options. They can give it a name, they can give a description, but they can't choose how much memory to assign, how much processor. That's all predefined by me, and that's stored in the deploy template. So that way we don't get a user taking the entire system for one partition. We control that.
Developers would never do that.
Yeah.
Right. So that's good. So you can basically put parameters around what can be deployed by users. So sounds like there's some security in here too, so you can establish, administrators like yourself and users who might be deploying their own environment.
Yeah, there's many levels of users, administrators, and I think there's deploy creation that can build these templates. The standard user can be a self-service user, so they can see their own partitions they've deployed or been assigned to them, and they can work with those only. There's ones that can view only, so they can just see the partitions are there and work, and start see what the status is on them.
Excellent. What about storage devices? Can you share your SAN across the VMs from here? How does that work?
This is where you define your SAN connections, basically based on the fabric that you define. Any of these SANs we can use for templates, for images. They're shared across the frames for the hardware, so any of my hosts that I have set up can see any of these SANs, or you can restrict them not to see them.
Okay.
But like I say, it's the one caveat right now that IBM's still working towards is once you do a deploy or like create a template, it's assigned to that SAN. So you need to manage that a little bit when you're creating your templates so that you balance your load. I think there's a request to have that changed around, but that's still one of the restrictions with SANs.
Okay. And then there's this configuration menu where you get into what features in the configuration panel do you use and why?
This is where you define your whole Power VC environment. You have users and groups. You can link them to Active Directory or LDAP. That's where you would assign what rights a person has, if they're just a self-deploy user or if they're administrator. You define the policies that are assigned to those. So I could pull off certain functions or add certain functions to certain levels. You define all your templates, all your rules. It's basically the whole configuration page here.
Okay, excellent. So that's where we get into the user rules and rights. That's good to know. Okay. What about this screen here, the storage connectivity group, the summary panel? Seems helpful to me. How do you use it?
This is where you define how the VMs or the deployments contact the HMC and how you define their connections to the SAN, to the systems and things like that. You define based on the platform, the hardware, and the BIOSes that are defined on there. So you can say, you can define how many BIOSes need to be connected if it uses NPIV or vSCSI. You can define a number of BIOSes that are required. It can be just one. It can be multiples. It's basically how the template, how Power VC knows to talk to the HMC to create the virtual resources.
Excellent. Good. Well, Tom, I want to thank you for sharing your expertise around IBM Power VC. We're going to move on and talk about some additional things around it. Now, the Power VC does have some shortcomings. You got to think about it as that it's helping you deploy and basically kind of create a cloud deployment capabilities across your Power server or Power servers. But there are some things you have to think about. You still have applications running within each of the operating systems. You maybe don't have visibility then into jobs and processes. You need that kind of thing. This doesn't really help you out with much with backups or high availability, and there's certainly no help with PTF levels. So we're going to share some things that we can do within the help systems technology to help you out and drill into some of those things a little further and give you that global view of your applications, your jobs, your backups, and PTF levels. So But before we do that and get into holistic monitoring, we're going to be on to our next polling question, which is are you using Power Vc? So it'll be interesting to see how many of you are actually using Power Vc. So do you use Power Vc, yes or no? Or never have heard of it before today's webinar? All right, we'll wait a little moment while Janine launches that second polling question for you to answer. So do you use Power Vc today? This has been very helpful technology for us. As you can imagine, we have many products that we have to test out across Linux, AIX, and Ibm I today. So, what's coming next from Help Systems? I know Chuck and I are doing a little webinar later on in December on what's new from the robot product line that kind of started Help Systems altogether. Look for that via email at some point in time. We'd love to share with you what we do there. Also, one of the things that we find very popular with our customers here at Help Systems is to do technology updates, and we do those one-on-one, and Chuck and I host a lot of those and would love to entertain chatting with you. And looks like our results are starting to come in here pretty good. Do you use Power Vc today? And those results are getting close to being done here, Janine, or are we?
Yes. So I've just
Okay.
launched the results to the audience.
Excellent. So looks like only 12% are using Power Vc today. 75%, 76% are not, and then we have a few people, 12% that have never heard of it before. So it's glad that we talked about it then, because I hope you feel just like I feel and Tom K feels. This is a very useful technology in helping you manage your systems. All right, let's go back here and move on to our next topic, which is holistic monitoring. And Chuck, you have the floor.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Even if
welcome.
you're not using Power Vc, you may very well be working in a virtualized environment and have multiple partitions, or for that matter, multiple footprints to keep your eye on from a system administration and certainly application health standpoint. So we talked about some of the challenges around managing this virtualized environment, even with Power Vc. What if you need to not only look at, for instance, how the partition or VM is configured from a memory and disk and connectivity standpoint, but what about the application running there? Is it running healthy? Is it getting the resources it needs to be healthy? Is there any reason, or have you been requested to report, for instance, on the historical performance or the uptime of those pieces and components that need to be healthy and available to your end users? Okay, and how can you quickly identify where the problem might exist and maybe even get notified electronically? And for that matter, Tom did mention PTF. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you some technology from Help Systems in the robot product line called Robot Monitor that we've had a lot of success with those companies using, especially in a multi-partition environment, although even single partition environments can take advantage of this technology for Ibm I and VIOS running on an AIX micro-partition. So this is a technology that runs native on Ibm I, and from a administrator standpoint, there is a graphical interface that gives you visibility into the status of those partitions that are incorporated into this technology. One of the technologies built into this robot monitor tool is dashboard technology. You can configure multiple dashboards to your needs, depending on whether, for instance, you're more interested in the application side or the performance side or the disk storage side and so forth. And you can incorporate multiple platforms as well as multiple partitions into the same dashboard. So for instance, here you're looking at dashboard information for both Ibm I and AIX. So this is telling you, for instance, at this point in time, here's where we are in terms of system performance on our Ibm I and our VIOS partition. However, if you do have a spike in system performance, maybe due to one of those rogue SQL requests that might be coming in through QZDASO and net, you have the ability to drill down to the job level and even the SQL statement level All right, we've all had to deal with those from time to time. So what happens is Robot Monitor is doing real-time performance monitoring of as many as 140 different metrics, but you can configure even more based on your needs. And at the same time, we're also collecting job information. What jobs are consuming CPU and disk I/O at that point in time, and we keep that for historical reporting and analysis. Also, part of the equation when it comes to virtualization is managing PTFs. All right, you've got multiple partitions. There's no magic in terms of loading and applying PTFs. But for instance, if you have some sort of discrepancy between partitions in terms of PTF, because we're touching all your partitions with this technology, we can also tell you where there might be a discrepancy. So for instance, here on our dock and dopey systems, you can see we do have some discrepancies as compared with our Academy and Wisdom systems. Okay, storage is always a concern on your partitions. So at any point in time, if you want maybe an overall view of what your storage looks like, you can have something like this. So here I've got 6 partitions, and very quickly and easily I can see exactly what the storage level is at the ASP level. Color coding is very important, and of course if I exceed any thresholds, color codes change, electronic notification is sent out, and if I'm more interested in what's consuming at the library or IFS level, we can also supply that information with Robot Monitor. Now, of course, looking at this information over time is important. So for instance, here's just an example of disk percent busy on a particular system called Wisdom, and you can see right about on the 5th of the month, we made a hardware change that caused our disk I/O to be a little less impactful to the system. And I'll show you what that looks live in our demonstration.
Looks
All
good,
right,
Chuck.
here it
We're getting close to seeing it on our end. I just wanted to give you a little feedback. There you go. You're live.
Fantastic. Okay, so what you're looking at is Robot Monitor. This is a graphical interface running on my Windows desktop, and this is a dashboard that I created called Production. These are my 3 production systems called Academy, Earl, and Wisdom. So right now, I can see exactly where my systems are for the last 30-second time instance in terms of CPU, batch CPU, disk percent full, even the number of spool files in QEasy job log, QEasy debug, system uptime, what's consuming JDBC or QZDASO init type activity, faulting rates, and so forth. All right. If we do have some sort of a spike, okay, we're going to see that here represented in the graph. You can see that my Wisdom CPU looks like it might be caused by JDBC is going up. While that's running, I'm going to direct your eyes to the center of this particular dashboard. This is my subsystem status indicators showing that it looks like I have some subsystems that might be important to the end users, okay, and that's showing up visually. And likewise, I'm also getting alerted. All right, so these are various alerts coming in from our robot alert interface to this tool, showing the fact that we've got some subsystems that are down. You can see we've got our JDBC CPU is starting to impact the system, so we're being notified of that. And we'll be able to drill down and find out exactly what that activity is on the system. We'll show you what that looks like. All right, so you can design these dashboards however you like. For instance, if I want to look at my overall storage across my Ibm I as well as VIOS partitions, okay, I can see that. I can see what's consuming storage on my Wisdom system in terms of library storage. I can even look at my auxiliary storage over time. So because we're collecting this information over time, every 30 seconds actually off your system, we're also taking that detailed 30-second data and we're summarizing it. We're summarizing it by hour, we're summarizing it by day, and we're summarizing it by month, so you can go down to that level to determine exactly what your trend is looking like. Okay? If you do have VIOS in your environment, of course we can give you visibility into that. Here's my VIOS partition called pop-ins. Okay, you can see I've got my disk adapter port statuses. They're telling me they're available. If they weren't, I'd be notified. In terms of adapter read throughput and write throughput, or even AIX errors, okay, I have visibility into those. Storage is pretty easy to see, CPU and so forth, okay? So I can see both my adapter status, network adapter status, and so forth on my VIOS partition. All right, let's go back and let's do a little drill down in my production environment, okay? I did have a little spike here in my CPU. We saw that represented in my vertical graph as well, okay? You can see we had a little spike here a couple times today. So if I'm interested in drilling down on that, all I have to do is drill down on the spike. It shows me the jobs that were running at that time consuming CPU or disk I/O. All right, and if that job is still active, we'll be able to work with the job and actually get all the way down to the SQL information, okay? So this job is still alive. Here's my library list information, call stack, open files, and any SQL information that may have caused an impact to the system. All right, let's go back to my Wisdom system. And let's do a little bit more historical drill down. Okay, so first of all, you can see there's many metrics associated with this system in terms of what I'm collecting. In fact, if I show you the item selection list, these are the many categories of metrics that we can collect from Ibm I. Okay, and I like to point out too that what we're collecting is not just system-related performance information, it's also application-related. So if there's certain files that you want to keep track of, for instance, maybe audit journals, QHIST, I already mentioned spool files and out queues, all that impacts your end user and theoretically could impact, for instance, your backups. How long does it take a particular backup to run? All right. In terms of application monitoring, for instance, there may be certain jobs that need to be active. Looks like everything's active here in terms of my banking application. If they were not active, I would be notified. All right. In terms of, for instance, current disk activity, all right, so it looks like I'm still within the normal range. I'm occasionally spiking here at about 8% disk busy, more so around the 4%. And this is for just the last hour. If I wanted to go out further, for instance, the last 9 hours, I could easily do that. But let's take a look at history. All right, so this is our history summary for disk busy. This is over the last 12 months. All right, and if I want to, for instance, drill down into November, okay, we were having some performance issues here early in November. Tom Komodowski made a change to my partitions, and you can see now our average disk busy percent is more so hovering around 2%. All right, and I can have visibility into that as well by asking for my ASP information for my Wisdom partition. All right, and if I scroll down, what we did is we added quite a few additional disk units to my partitions, basically giving me more virtual disk arms so that my I/O would be improved. All right, so thank you, Tom Komodowski, for doing that. Also, we have a very simple way to get to the system level information. So for instance, things like serial number, how many processors, CPW rating, scrolling down, PTF packages installed, partition information. On my footprint, I have 98 partitions. This is partition number 64, 24 shared processors, and here's my processor and memory limits. All right. Mentioned PTF, the difficulty with managing PTFs across a virtualized environment, because we're touching many of our partitions here on this system, what we can do is we can do a PTF comparison, and that can be not just IBM I, but also AIX. So for instance, if I want to compare all of my 7.3 systems together using Wisdom as my model system, so I'm going to compare everything to Wisdom, and I'm going to look at the PTF status where there's a mismatch, okay? So it looks like Academy and Wisdom are pretty well equal, but it looks like Doc, Dopey, and Earl have some PTFs that need to be applied or possibly even loaded. And so it looks like, I'm sorry, Tom Komodowski, looks like you got a little work to do. And then if you are wondering what the particular PTF is, all you have to do is double click on the PTF and we take you out to the cover letter for that PTF. Okay. And finally, we've got a lot going on here. We've got a lot of thresholds set. If you just want to know overall, okay, what's going on? What thresholds have been exceeded? What is not healthy across my environment? Okay, these are all my issues that I have going on across all of my partitions. So I have all my partitions listed here and a complete list of everything that I'm monitoring. And if I'm more concerned with just a particular system, of course, I can subset and see exactly what's going on. So we call Robot Monitor our system application and performance monitoring tool, and certainly gives you great visibility into your virtualized environment. Tom, I'm going to end my screen share.
Excellent. Wow, that was a great demonstration, Chuck, in sharing some of the capabilities of Robot Monitor and the ability to get a more insight view into the applications, disk space, BIOS, AIX, and all those things that are happening in your environment that might be controlled by IBM Power Vc. So thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about high availability. It's another area where, really backups and high availability where those are not handled by the IBM Power Vc. We still need to make sure that we have proper things in place. Go back to our marketplace survey again, and what systems do you have in place for recovery from a disaster? And it looks like about 50% of the market, anyways, of the what I'd call medium size and larger environments have high availability. Even though the marketplace survey did capture smaller accounts, I'll kind of go on saying that that's probably more like a 50-50 type environment. But many of us still, default to recovering from tape yet, and some of us are doing virtual tape library support in here. Nonetheless, I think the market is about at a 50% those who have high availability already. So what Power VC does provide HA for IBM I, well, it does not provide data replication, does not back up the data. You still need to think about real-time data replication, whether it's hardware or whether it's software-based. And disasters can come to the data center where you're running this entire footprint. God forbid you have a power failure and don't have or haven't tested your generator. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can cause problems. Tom K could probably go on and on about things that he thinks about or worries about every day, and this is at that point in time exactly where we say let's knock on wood and make sure that Tom Huntington doesn't cause any problems by just talking about it. So why high availability? Well, of course we want to create copies of our data and objects across those VM environments so we have business resiliency. We want to make sure that our data is replicated, because ultimately that's what matters. So you can't go to IBM or Help Systems to buy back your customer data. You might also want to build test data from one partition to another without using the IBM Power VC, because you want to keep that partition live all the time. Obviously, if you're going to be deploying and provisioning, you're always starting back at that original version of the data. And then, of course, we also have people that use high availability for building out business intelligence partitions. So anytime we start thinking about business resiliency, HA, recovery, we have to start thinking about RPO and RTO and really where we want to be on that paradigm. How much data can we afford to lose? and when do we need to have our systems back up is really kind of that measuring that you need to do for HA. Think about talking to your financial staff about what is an hour of downtime, and this is something that, and what does it cost you? This is what's used to help justify building out an HA solution along with this IBM Power Vc environment. We have to think about a cost of an hour of downtime. What's the impact on all the end users, the impact on your customers to help justify this? Something else you should consider is that if you have a documented and proven high availability environment, you do get a reduction in your business insurance that you're charged. So let's take a look at two different technologies that we have here for providing HA today in the IBM world. And this is for IBM I. Well, actually, AIX also has Power HA, and so does Linux. Help Systems happens to work with IBM Power HA for IBM I. But this is hardware-based replication. And the way this works is you load your business application into an independent auxiliary storage pool, which again can exist and coexist with the IBM Power Vc technology controlling your VM stacks. You can still have independent auxiliary storage pools. We have those in our environment. And so your business application loads in an IASP, and then as data changes in your IASP, it's automatically replicated sector by sector over to the targeted IASP. The difference with Power HA and software replication is this targeted IASP is not up and running. It's basically a set of disks that's mirroring the production disk, and customers have been using this technology on the IBM I platform for over a decade now. So Power HA can live within your Power VC environment. I think that that's a very, very important part that you need to understand. Power HA works with SAN, but it also works with internal disks too. So if you have internal disks, you can use it even outside of the IBM Power VC technology. Software replication, which has been around really for well over 3 decades now on the IBM I platform anyways, is using a technology called journaling and remote journaling for the most part. I know there are different solutions out there that don't use remote journaling, but most everyone, the main players out there, actually use local and remote journaling, which is part of the operating system. What you're doing here is you're defining what libraries, what physical files, what data areas, what IFS directories do I want to replicate. Now, in the case of this, we don't use independent auxiliary storage pools. We're just using your standard system pool to be able to replicate your data real time, record by record, transaction by transaction. It's going across the connection. With software replication, you do get the flexibility of being able to define what libraries you want and what libraries you want to define, what directories, so you get some flexibility there. The other aspect of this is not all objects are journaled. Not all objects that you're concerned about are physical files and data areas. You also have program objects, job descriptions, user profiles, and other things that you're going to periodically pick up. The software vendors out there either use save change object APIs like we do in the Robot HA product, or they might use Q Audit Journal to be able to replicate objects across your network. They'll read that and determine what's new and how they move them around. So software-based replication also works with the Power VC environment. You can use either or, hardware or software replication in this environment. But a very important part of your business climate as you have more and more eggs in the basket, you have to make sure that you have your environment highly replicated. That's really kind of the moral of the story with HA and how that plays with the virtualization environment. Just because you're virtualized doesn't mean that you don't need HA technology. So we really, this has been great. We have a lot of great questions about IBM Power VC and Robot Monitor that we need to get to. But before we do that, just to remind you that over 70% of the IBM I customers out there run some VMs in their network. IBM Power VC is a great tool for onboarding new images and controlling your resources, as Tom K demonstrated today. And then a Robot Monitor can help you get that visibility, however, into those applications and resources in a real-time monitoring aspect across your AIX, IBM I, BIOS environments. And then PowerHA from Help Systems and Robot HA provide replication for your VMs to VM, being able to go from IBM I partition to IBM I partition. I can replicate my data real time across that environment, either with Robot HA or PowerHA. All right, so we're on to our last polling question here before we get to Q&A. I'm going to load that up in the background, or I should say Janine will load that up for you. In your opinion, what's your biggest area of opportunity today? Select all that apply. The need for a single dashboard of performance across my VMs, application monitoring across my VMs. I want to be able to look at my ERP system, my payroll system that I'm running on IBM I. You want to be able to consolidate dashboards of events from QSys Opera and other resources across your environment. Data replication across VMs for high availability. I'm concerned about that. This is a big area of opportunity that we need to revisit in our infrastructure. Or I'm looking at this Power technology, looking at going to POWER9 here in the next quarter or next 6 months, and I'm on Power 7 or I'm on Power 6, and I want to look at my performance capacity planning and make sure that I'm sizing my system appropriately. You can check more, again, than just one here. You can check all of that apply. We want to thank you for answering this polling question, and in just a moment we'll get to some of the great questions that we've had into our Q&A here today. Chuck and Tom and I are certainly always available for any questions that you might have in these various areas. Feel free to reach out through IBM Magazine or through Help Systems and get connected up with us to help you out here. Janine, how are you doing on this last question?
I'm going to go ahead and launch those to the audience now.
Excellent, excellent. Well, it looks like our number one thing was the single dashboard of performance across all my VMs. Seems to be the most popular thing. And then performance capacity planning. I know that POWER9 is on a lot of customers' mind and helping to size that business is at 57%. And then we get into application monitoring and consolidation of dashboard events for QSys Opera. That's about an even split there with about 40%. That number's changing a little bit as we talk. And then database replications. Still customers out there worried about that and making sure high availability is handled properly. All right, so let's move back into the slide deck here. And, Janine, I think it's time for questions and answers.
Great, Tom. Okay, let's start right at the beginning here. Oh, this one goes back. I'm not sure if this will make sense now, but when you and Tom were talking about Power Vc, where is the Power Vc instance running?
Yeah, the Power Vc application runs on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. You can run it on an x86 platform or a Power platform. They do support running it on Red Hat on Power now. So you can run it on a virtual machine on your frame and control your frames from that. It's actually pretty cool. They are working on adding other OSs to the list. They haven't announced any yet, but they are working on that. But we run ours on a x86 VM right now in our vCloud environment.
Thanks, Tom.
Next question. Does Power VC work with NPIV?
Yes, Power VC supports Virtual SCSI as well as NPIV. You can run it for NPIV for the disk as well as virtual tape. Power VC right now does not assign or define virtual tape environments. They're coming out with that in the next release sometime this month. I think it's in the next week. They're going to be adding virtual tape support to NPIV. If you need NPIV for virtual tape, you have to do that part manually. But you can run mixed Virtual SCSI as well as NPIV. You can define all that within the way you have your BIOSes, and that defined within Power VC. And it's all done for you. All the fabric assigns are all done for you. You just tell it you want to roll out NPIV, and it's all set up.
Great. And while I've got you talking, Tom, how would you recommend folks build their own templates?
Templates that's always the tough starting point, is where you start with, how do you create the first template. The best recommendation I can say is you manually define your environment in your HMC first, but don't install an OS. Create a blank template, define it with either big ending or little ending if you're doing Linux, and just capture that blank template. Then you can deploy that and very easily add your OSs to it. So I can create a blank template and then decide to load Ibm I into it. Then I can use that same blank template, deploy another image for it, and load AX on that. And then once you have those created, then you run the Power VC, magic, capture those images, and then use those for your normal deploy templates. But yeah, your first template, you can either capture an existing system and use that, or create a blank one from scratch.
Thanks. And then I think we're moving here to robot monitors. So Chuck, I'll throw this to you, and you can defer it if you need to. How do I add monitoring to a new partition?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a feature in the product where you go to the central system. So Robot Monitor is configured or architected in a kind of a hub and spoke method. So one of your partitions is the central data collection partition where you connect the Robot Monitor GUI to, and then there's agents that run on the other partitions. That includes your VIOS partitions, and they report up to that central partition. So from that central partition, you can push out the agent software to other newly genned VMs. Or you can install it directly and just simply tell it what central system to report to.
And so since we're on this conversation, I have another one regarding partitions. How do we get monthly reporting for our partitions?
All right. So I guess I failed to show that during the presentation, but in Robot Monitor, any of the data that you see on the screen, we can also create hard copy reports. So as long as you have the Robot Monitor GUI available, you can go to the reporting feature and tell it to, for instance, report on whatever metrics that are interesting to you, whether it's, for instance, subsystem uptime, job performance, system performance, disk storage, and so forth. And you can have that report go to a directory, either a shared network directory or a local directory. It's a graphical report. And you can tell the report whether you want, for instance, data from this month, last month, or a different month, or even a year's worth of data, for instance, the last 12 months worth of data. So many reporting options, highly configurable to your needs. We'll email the reports out automatically if you so desire. And ultimately, the whole reporting process would simply be scheduled in, for instance, something like the Windows Task Scheduler, or a product like one of our Windows schedulers like Automate Schedule.
Okay, next question. Does my replication process care if the partition is virtualized by Power Vc?
Yeah, I'll take that one. This is Tom Huntington. No, it really doesn't. It's just another instance of, if it's Power HA for AIX or Ibm I or Linux, it's just another defined environment for that product. If it's software replication, we're talking Ibm I. Again, you just have partitions, and from partition to partition, we could stay even within the same frame and do replication. We do have some customers that do that just simply to offload their backups. They might have a production VM and they replicate from that production VM to another VM, and they do their backups over there just to reduce downtime. That's not high availability because that same frame is in the same data center. Obviously, if you want high availability, you want to be replicating to another frame somewhere else in this world, or outside of the grid, as they say, not necessarily off the grid, but outside the grid from a power standpoint. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to jump back here to Power VC for possibly the last question. All
right.
Okay, what are the user interface requirements for Power VC?
Well, basically, Power VC runs on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. and it functions as a web server on there. All you need to do to access Power VC is a web browser. They support, IBM says they support Chrome, Firefox, and Internet Explorer. They say they don't support Edge, but it does work in Edge. So far, that's what I've been using. It works fine. But anything you get a web browser on, you're good to go. You can even do it on your phone if you really wanted to.
Yeah, I run it from Google Chrome on my end, Tom. So excellent.
Yep.
So, Tom, I had another question pop in here. Can I manage my backup and recovery devices, say tape, through Power VC?
At this point, like you say, Power VC does not have support for virtual tapes. They are adding it in this next release. Like I say, it should be due out in a week. We'll know more about it once that comes out. But yeah, that has been a big request of IBM, and they've been working actively on it. You can do it manually through the NPIV for now, but I got my fingers crossed it's going to work well, because I'm struggling with that with here as well.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing to consider too is the tape management softwares like Robot Save and BRMS do have tape resource capabilities in there too that we could help you out with, Tom. We probably haven't talked about that, but we probably have some ways of helping you share some of those resources across this environment too.
Yeah, the tape itself, the physical assigning to the partitions and all that would be done Power VC wise, but once it's there, you know, that's where you do a BRMS or a Robot Save to work with that at that point.
Yep. Good.
All right. Fantastic. That's all we have time for today. It was a great list, great questions. Thank you, everybody. I also want to thank you for attending the webinar today. I want to thank our friends from Help Systems, Tom, and Chuck, for sharing their expertise with us today. Later this week, we will be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the recording of today's webinar. So thanks again for joining us. That concludes our webinar. Have a great day.
Thank you, Janine.
Thanks, Tom.